The position's a full-time role, the head selection role, national selector role. Andrew is not available to work full-time. He's just set up a new legal practice, and so he's not available to apply for the role. Greg Chappell is the national talent manager. I think it's a bit of a misnomer that he's a full-time selector. He's not. He's a national talent manager probably 80% of the time and 20% as a selector. When you get a chance to read the report, you'll see that the recommendation from Don's report that the role of the national talent manager not be a selector.
And in terms of Andrew Hilditch, it says he's welcome to apply for positions. Is he welcome to apply for one of the part-time positions, or is his time as an Australian selector finished now?
Look, I haven't spoken to Andrew about that. He's certainly unavailable for the top job. I'm not too sure of the rest.
Jack, Steve Pearce from the ACC. Are you able to clarify why you haven't just offered Tim Nielsen the expanded coaching role as it stands now?
Look, the job is a far outstanding role. I mean, it's not. The coach of the Australian team is a tough job anyway. I mean, with the travel and that sort of thing. It's going to take some additional time and extra skill sets to put a strategy for the whole of Australian coaching. We need to align, we believe, and the report quite clearly sets it out. We need to align the coaching so that there's one philosophy which the head coach has got to be able to articulate and get that through the state coaches and all other coaches in the system, COE or whatever. Tim can apply for the job, and he may well get the job, but it's a different role, and in a restructure, you just don't give someone the job in a new role.
Over here. Jack, just following on from that, does that mean Tim's got a contract, as I understand it, was contracted for 3 years before the Ashes series? Does that mean if he doesn't get the head coaching role, that he'll continue on in some other form of coaching role, or does that mean if he doesn't get the head coaching role, then there won't be a position for him?
Well, I can answer that, Jack. I think, look, I think we don't want to get ahead of ourselves here. Tim Nielsen may well be the best person for this new role, but quite clearly the report talks about new structures that are in place, and we need to deliver a very strong performance and accountability culture within the Australian team. Tim will be welcome to apply for that job, and we'll work that through. But with a new job, we need to just make sure we've got the best person in the job, and there's no reason why that can't be Tim Nielsen.
So, but it's not at the moment, and if it's not, what happens with his 3-year contract?
Well, let's deal with that if that is ever the case. But right now, that's pure speculation.
So you have no qualms about ending his contract if he doesn't get the job?
Let's deal with that if that is an issue. But right now, it's not an issue.
Chloe?
Can you expand on the reasons, Jack or James, for the thinking behind having the captain coach and other selectors and other potential dangers with that as well?
Probably in the time in cricket administration, which is probably getting on a bit now, it's probably the greatest chestnut. I reckon there's been a change of view on whether coaches and captains should be selected as many times. Don can perhaps add some comments after me, but I think the 3 captains on there probably would have had a certain view at one stage. Interestingly, they all came to the view that to make that person accountable, and these structures are all about accountability, I've got to say. To make those people accountable, they need to be selectors. And the board accepted that. Don, I don't know whether you want to make some other comments there.
Oh, Chloe, just one of the things that came up was the communication between the players and the selectors, and I'm sure you've heard that. And what we've done is to try and get adult conversations going around the panel of selectors and the players. And normally communication solves most insecurities, and if we achieve that, that'll be a huge step forward.
Next question down the back.
Jack, Roger Alden from Channel 10. You said that Andrew Hilditch and Tim Nielsen will lead roles in the interim. What sort of time frame are we looking at here?
Good question. We want it to be as short as possible, but having said that, we want to get the best people for the job. James's primary role would be get the new general manager of team performance underway, but at the same time start looking at the other roles. But it would be unfair if we recruited the general manager team performance and he already had the other structures in place, because he is going to be responsible for the performance of the team, the performance of the coach, and the performance of other people in the elite system. So there's going to be a bit of a batting order there, but I can't give you a time frame because it's going to be a global search. We're not going to just look in our own backyard. We want to get the best person for the job. obviously, it's preferable that sooner rather than later, but I'm sorry, I can't give you a time frame.
So the general manager of team performance will be involved in picking the new head coach and selector.
Yes.
Down here, Lee Mulligan.
Don, I just wanted to ask, when you conducted this report, it's a pretty damning report, by the way. Did you know full well that, heads may roll as a result?
Again, we didn't get into the personalities. Our role was to examine the strategy and then set up a structure that would deliver at least something that gave us an opportunity to get back to number one. So you never know what you're going to come up with in a report.
Were you surprised at the state of things? There were some things in there that don't sound
Well, I've been reading what you guys have been saying, so I wouldn't be surprised. But it's I've sort of I had a fair idea what was there. And look, corporations go through this all the time. You go through a halcyon period, and then they go into a decline, and you've got to go back in and start to work your way back up again. And this is no different.
Daniel Braddock.
Don, I just wanted to get a little bit more detail from you about how closely you looked at England's structures, England's recent success.
Yeah, I saw some speculation about that, but I'll tell the story. I got an email overnight from a good friend of mine in England, and he said, now that we're number one, would you like some input into your report? And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I was thinking about putting in that we have a recommendation, we get a Zimbabwean coach and 4 South Africans into the side. I only can remember 4. So the answer is no, it had no bearing on it. Look, I had a look at that as a passing phase, but if you have a look at the structure, you'll have a look at corporate structures of high performance organisations around the world, you'll find some similarities.
Gerard Blackley, and then we'll go back over here.
To any of the three of you, what would you categorise as the key breakdown or the key failure that led to the summer of cricket we saw during the Ashes? What have you identified as the key letdown there?
You want to?
Look, this is from an outsider's point of view. When you come into an organisation, clearly you look at it in a different set of lenses. And the lack of accountability and the performance, the lack of accountability and the objective of really performing was something that wasn't in the jargon that was coming through. And that's from what I'm used to outside. So that's an outsider's view.
Over here, Chloe.
Don, there's been considerable angst in Australian cricket about the impact of the expansion of the Big Bash League and how that will influence traditional cricket. Was that conveyed to you through the interviews and in compiling this review?
Not as a negative. It's part of the landscape we work in now, and Big Bash is part of the landscape. And I think the biggest challenge that James and his team have got is how they're going to schedule it all, and I think that's going to be a huge challenge for all nations as you start to manage this new form of cricket.
Julian Stoop down the back, and then we'll go back to Roger.
James, when you first saw the report, was there anything in there or a couple of things in there that really shocked you or really surprised you about some of the feedback that you received?
I don't think there were any major surprises. I mean, it's a harsh review. It's something that we need to face up to and will face up to. The Ashes was quite clearly a catalyst for a major review, and as is identified in the review, there's a couple of components to it. One is specifically around the Australian team, and then more broadly around the systems. And I think it really works to. It aligns back to our strategy and sets up structures that are in place. And I think the harsh reality of the Ashes series gone is that none of us like and enjoy not being number one. And I think what we have now is some clear structures and accountabilities that will drive a performance culture that sees us back on top as soon as possible.
Roger down the back, and then we'll come to Malcolm Conn, and then Greg Ball.
John, there's been plenty of criticism of the contract structure in Australian cricket as recently as just a couple of months ago when the new contracts were offered. Will that be restructured in the, is the recommendation that be restructured?
That's up to James and his negotiations that he has, but we do live in a world of pay and performance, and it's one that I'm sure that we would like Cricket Australia to look at.
Malcolm Conn. Yeah, what's the feeling amongst all of you about the standard of the Sheffield Shield competition?
I think if you knew the answer to that, Malcolm, we wouldn't be where we are probably in the ladder. But it is look, I've always believed that Sheffield Shield is an absolutely critical plank in our success. And look, not making excuses, but you have to sometimes look in rear vision mirrors. But you know, when we had those great players, it wasn't just the great players. We had, just take the Queensland side. They had blokes like Bickle, Kasperwitz, Love, Maher, Seckham, who were just also fantastic, tough cricketers who probably in another era would have played lost Test cricket. We lost not just the top blokes, just a lot of blokes. And I look, it worries me that there's been, some players around who have been the next best thing for a long time and haven't really produced. And look, I think it is a concern. Whether it's coaching, whether it's, I don't know. But this new structural system, hopefully, Malcolm, will flush that out because it's critical that it is flushed out.
Greg Bob?
Don, reading the long-term steps here, it seems to suggest that you might think that Test cricket has lost its priority in Australian cricket thinking. You talk about recognising that the grade cricket is a vital pathway. Do you think that's been marginalised in recent years? And my other question out of that is about the Big Bash League. You seem to suggest that perhaps the way it's set up is working against the best interests of Test cricket.
Oh, I'm sorry if it read like that. Certainly, we all supported that Test cricket has to be the priority, and you must develop your players that way. And listening to some of the former captains and former greats, they believe it doesn't matter what sort of cricket you play, technique will always prevail. So I'd like to think that we can get back to number one in Test cricket very quickly, and the rest of it will flow. On the grade cricket, we recognise that society is changing, and dads can't be expected to be on the cricket field on Saturday and Sunday. The family has their needs, and that's a little different from the era that I grew up in, and a lot of people in this room have grown up with. So all that is a marker to say, please have a look at that, because others will take your space if you don't get into there. And the Big Bash, well, that's part of the landscape we've got now. So and we have to work with that.
Steve Pearce, and then Daniel Reddy.
Jack, given that Andrew's now not available to apply for this new full-time chairman selected role, what legacy do you think he leaves Australian cricket from this time?
Look, Andrew's been a selector for either 15 or 16 years. He's been chairman for 5 or 6 years. The last few years haven't been successful as he would have wanted or anyone would have wanted. But I think to blame him for it is just ridiculous. But I think, look, Andrew is a very honourable man who has given his heart and soul to the game. I'm not too sure that selectors leave legacies, I've got to say. Players leave legacies and teams leave legacies. I'm not too sure selectors do, but so I probably hasn't answered your question, but I just don't think a selector can leave a legacy as such.
Do you identify, though, with the public's frustration with his position and the selection that's happened over the last couple of years?
Look, I'm not really going to get into personalities. This is really about moving forward. I think it's just unfair to look for scapegoats or make comments about individuals. I'm sorry.
Daniel Reddy.
For James or Jack, just to clarify, is Greg Chaplin happy to continue as National Talent Manager without being selector, or is that whole position opened up?
Well, in terms of whether Greg's happy or not, that's something that you can ask him. I've spoken to him ahead of these recommendations being handed down. So he understands what was recommended and what the board has adopted in that respect. And we'll go forward from there. He may well have some decisions to make himself about that, but that's really in his hands.
But he seemed accepting of it on the basis.
Look, it was a brief conversation. I had a lot of people to speak to today. I was delivering a message to give him an update. He hasn't seen the report, for example, so he needs time to digest that. I don't have a feel for what his response was.
Chloe Salto.
James, in relation to the two part-time selection roles, does it independent mean that Jamie Potts has to step aside as well, when he holds a role in South Australia?
There's some commentary in the report about that as I see it. I think from memory the report talks about perhaps ideally they would be independent of state associations and not holding down a full-time job with a state association. But the report also says there is no evidence of that being a problem. The panel found no evidence of that being a problem, and ultimately the panel felt that the most important thing was that the people appointed into these roles are the best people for the job.
Thank you. Leith?
Don, I just want to ask, as a selector and a coach have paid, I guess, for the state of cricket, what about a board level administration?
Just run that again, please.
Doesn't the responsibility also spread to administration, board level of Cricket Australia? I mean, was there any consideration that...
Well, boards have to set what risks they want to manage, and then they devolve it down. And I would think, and I'd hope, that those that have got functional roles have key performance indicators. That's the corporate world that I come from, and I would hope that when James starts to implement this thing, that's the path they take. Because if you're going to get accountability, then the world's all about measurement. And if you measure something, then you get it done. So that's what this structure's about, and I'd hope that will be an outcome. As for the board, I'm not sure how you could put a performance measure on it, but it's one that I'm sure we'll put our mind to it at some stage.
Roger, down the back.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, just again on Greg Chappell, but so he, obviously, Nielsen's position's been altered, he can reapply. Chappell's position's been altered too, but is the intention that he can, if he's happy to continue, he's the man that you guys want in that position?
Greg Chappell is the Cricket Australia National Talent Manager, and he will continue in that role. The recommendation of the panel, which has been adopted by the board, is that the National Talent Manager will report through to the new full-time National Selector. And it was seen as important that there's a segregation of duty between the National Selector and the National Talent Manager such that the National Talent Manager was no longer a selector. Nothing to do with personality or anything like that. It's purely a structural decision that best divests accountability.
Daniel Reddy?
James, just regarding Michael Brown and the creation of the new position to sit alongside him, does that indicate that you want someone with I suppose, a greater direct cricket background in that position, whereas, obviously Michael's involvement prior to cricket before administration, etc.?
Look, I wouldn't want to get too specific about the person specification, if you like, for this new role. We need to think very carefully about what we want from this role, and the more you narrow it down, the more you narrow the field. We know what the outcomes are, we know what our strategy is, and we know what the outcomes are, and we need to be open to, as Jack's talked about, it will be a global search, and in terms of having a cricket background, obviously that would be a very significant benefit, but I don't think we should be so foolish as to be very specific that it has to be a cricket background, because it may well be that the best person for the job doesn't have a cricket background.
Right down the back, and then over here.
Tony Shimeki from SEN. Jane, you might be the best to answer this. There's some word this morning that there may have been a fallout between Greg Chappell and the players, and that the players had barred him from the dressing room. Are you aware of that at all?
I'm not aware of any sort of barring or anything like that. I know there was various tensions during the course of the summer where players wanted their own time in the dressing room, and I think at various stages I probably wasn't welcome in the dressing room either.
Greg Baum?
James or Jack, this report's been a long time coming, understandably. We're already effectively in 20 season. How soon do you think you can realistically implement what you intend to do?
As I pretty well said earlier, I mean, we want to do it as soon as possible, Greg. We don't want to leave, but we don't want to leave any stone unturned and not getting the best people. So it's really the general manager team performance is the most critical one, because he has to really be involved with the other two roles. But we need to also start down the track. We can't wait as a point and start the new search either. So there's going to be some overlap. But to give a time frame, Greg, is just too hard. It's how long a piece of string a bit, because if we have a global search, it's going to take a while to get that list. It's going to take a while to do assessment. Ideally, it'd only be 8 weeks, but to try and put a time frame on it, sorry, it's just too hard.
Roger Vaughan down the front, and then we'll go down the back.
James or Jack, I know this is very comprehensive today, but also Colin Carter is doing another review. Can you give us any update on where that's at? I think there might be some
Yeah, I can do that. Colin Carter and David Crawford are doing a governance review. They're still conferring with the states about that. They've still got some states to go. I anticipate they'll probably give a preliminary report to the board in October. One thing I've got to make, though, it's not a board decision, actually, whether you change the board. Everyone thinks that we should sack ourselves, obviously, but or something. But in fact, it's the states, the shareholders, actually, under the Constitution, are the people who appoint the board. So any changes that are made to the board structure, the Constitution or whatever, actually have to come from the state associations, and it's their call. So that's why there's got to have to be extensive consultation, and this consultation is only the first one. There'll be a second or perhaps even third round of consultations with them. So again, sorry, I can't give you when we appointed David and Crawford, our initial planning before we appointed David and Colin was to the AGM in late October. That's not a possibility, and David and Colin told us earlier in the piece that wasn't a possibility either.
Down the back?
John Stanstock from Peter. Did you get any resistance for not being a cricket person, the right hockey benefit, and sort of coming from the corporate world?
I'd call myself a cricket tragic. I can watch cricket anywhere in the world if I get an opportunity. So, no, I didn't get the resistance. No, I think I've been around sporting bodies enough now to understand how they work.
Can I actually perhaps add something there? I mean, we sought Don out particularly as the orchestra, the orchestra conductor, if you like. You need someone with corporate experience, and I don't think Don's CV is surpassed by many. You need someone who's actually going to talk about accountability in those roles. I think just cricketers themselves doing it, they need some guidance. That's what happened.
Lola from the Australian?
Don, with your experience with changing corporate cultures and things, can you foresee how long this is going to take and when we will see some results of it? And will this stop us falling to number 5 in being beat by England 2 Ashes series in a row?
Well, there's no silver bullet in any transitions or any reform programs you put in place. It's an orderly process, and you can write all the good words, but really it's all in the execution now, and that's going to be the test. I think it'll take the best part of 18 months before you see the seeds of anything really changing. I think people will feel a lot better when the side starts to perform on the field, but hopefully this will take a lot of the side pressures and other distractions away from the team and let them just concentrate on what's going on on the field, and I think that'll be a good step forward.
Jared, down in the...
If we do this properly, will we not find...
I can't even pick currency, so there's no good me asking where you're going to finish in a cricket competition.
Jared, and then we'll go to Malcolm.
James, to pick up on what Jack said about the value of hindsight, now that you've seen what the failures have been identified as, do you think some of them were foreseeable heading into the summer and perhaps should have been picked up and addressed before it happened?
Look, I think the report clearly identifies that to some extent we've been victims of our own success. The success has perhaps masked some of the cracks that may well have been appearing along the way. I mean, if you go back, for example, to the summer of 2009-10, the year before we disastrously lost the Ashes, we played 8 Test matches and we won 7 of them. So, on a performance basis, if you look at that, if you look at the win-loss record, it may be difficult to specifically identify too much that's wrong with what's going on. But what I'm really pleased about is that this review and its recommendations recommend a structure that the board has already sought to put in place that is designed to deliver accountability and performance of the like that Australian cricket has never seen before. And I think that, as a starting point, is a very significant step forward and should be the makings of a very significant turnaround.
Malcolm Conn. Can I ask James, with the restructure, do Clark and Nielsen automatically become selected on the Tour of Sri Lanka for the Test Series? Does Greg Chappell stay on as a selector in the Test Series?
The board has resolved today that that Michael Clark and Tim Nielsen will immediately become selectors. It's also confirmed that the selection panel will remain in place as it is with those two additions until such time as that restructure is confirmed and those new positions are appointed. It's very, very important to keep business as usual as best we can there.
Right, so Greg Chappell remains a selector for the rest of this tour?
Yes. What I said was until such time as we appoint the national selector and the part-time selectors.
Roger Vaughan?
Don, just, you were asked before how long it will take to get results from this review that Cricket Australia wants to see. We spoke about how, removing some side tensions, I think was the term you used, would help. Would there be, do you think, you're saying 18 months, do you think there will be some immediate positive sort of results? And I'm thinking here, especially in terms of the national team's performance.
Oh, look, I think if the national team can concentrate on starting to get a winning culture going again, that's a good start. And it doesn't need to be distracted about all the noise about selection and other stuff that they read, and I'm sure that unsettles them. And this just gets the structure settled down, and they can concentrate on what they do best. And that's really what it'll be all about.
And that, do you think that could transfer into immediate sort of...
I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful.
Any more questions, ladies and gentlemen? Order, sorry?
Can I just ask one more?
Certainly,
I
Steve.
know you don't want to put a timeline on the appointments of the new panel, but can you say that the new panel, the new chairman selectors will be in place by the summer, in time for the summer test series?
I can say that the appointment of a full-time national selector is an absolute priority, but it doesn't outrank the priority of getting the new general manager of team performance there, because as Jack explained earlier, it's very important that that person has a say in the selection, because the national selector will report directly to the team performance manager, and that is a significant change from where it's been before, because the selectors have in the past reported through to the board. And so that's a significant change in structure, and it's very important that it works in that sequence.